How are y'all enjoying Into the Inklands? I'm enjoying how much deck variety I'm seeing on Pixelborn. I've been testing out a few new decks of my own with differing levels of success, and that's okay. That's the whole idea behind experimentation. But one deck I find myself coming back to over and over, both because of how fun it is to play and how well it seems to perform in terms of win rate, is the Ruby Steel Challenge deck, or what I'm calling On Guard! Rise of the Floodborn gave us quite a few tools for this deck with Shere Khan and the Steel Jafars, but some of them ended up a little clunky, like the Ruby Queens of Hearts. Sensing Weakness has a great effect, but playing her at 5 means you're not playing Maui Hero to all or shifting out Aladdin and Impulsive Ruler, while a good card in her own right isn't a good shift target. Because in having Rush, the whole idea is you want to swing out with her immediately and she'll likely die, either on contact or on crackback on your opponent's turn. So the deck kind of languished a bit, especially since quite a few decks would just see that you're a challenge deck and just not quest, denying you any targets. Couple that with the inconsistent draw, mostly coming from the clumsy Sensing Weaknesses, it's not hard to see why this deck didn't pierce the Rise of the Floodborn meta. But Into the Inklands has given us a few new toys that make the deck actually work. Firstly, we got the 2 Steel Robin Hoods, most importantly, Champion of Sherwood, who can come out as early as turn 3, able to snipe something or sing something, or even just quest if your opponent hasn't added anything to the board. And the great thing about him is if your opponent gets rid of him through challenges, you still get to draw a card! Champion is a fantastic card and is seeing play in basically every Steel deck right now for good reason. The other important tool is Maui's Fish Hook, which has surprised me by how good it is, especially since item removal seems to have vanished completely from the meta. It can give a character evasive, letting them either snipe an opposing evasive or just stay protected for a turn, or it can give them +3 strength, which will usually be enough to take out either a character or a location. And locations are seeing a lot of play right now, so this is important. On that note, we also got And Then Along Came Zeus, which can delete most characters, and can either delete a location or drop it into a range where one of your characters can finish it off in a challenge. In my previous try at this deck, I tried to make it with only challenging for removal, but that was honestly restrictive and a pretty silly thing to self-impose. So let's go over the full makeup of the deck. For this one, everything is 4 copies, which will simplify things. Our sole 1-drop is Robin Hood Beloved Outlaw, entirely as a shift target, but also you will want to mulligan hard for it to make sure you have something to play in turn 1. However, this deck has a few built-in catch-up tools, so if you miss your turn 1 play, it's not the end of the world. We also run Capable Fighter, either for pings or as a secondary shift target in case Beloved Outlaw either gets removed or you didn't get him in your opening hand. Of course, the card wanting to shift onto them is Champion of Sherwood, one of the best cards in this deck. A hand with one of each of those Robin's Hood and some ink will be perfect, and should set you up nicely. We also run the 2 Steel Jafars, Royal Vizier as a shift target and additional evasive sniping, and Dreadnought because it's just, good. Honestly, I usually just play Dreadnought on 4. I don't think I've ever actually shifted him, he's just that good a card. Rounding out our Steel characters are the obligatory Tinker's Bell, Tiny Tactician, and Giant Fairy. I've talked before about how good they are, and there's really no reason not to include them in every Steel deck. For Ruby characters, we have another shifting pair in the Aladdins, Street Rat and Heroic Outlaw. They kind of disappeared from the meta during Rise of the Floodborn, but with Amethyst having so much lore burn with Goat and Spellbook and now the boss is on a roll, I think having some lore steal is key, and shifting out Heroic Outlaw can swing the game massively in your favor. We also run Shere Khan, Menacing Predator, who lets us progress to our win con while establishing board dominance. He will usually aggro removal, which is honestly nice because that means that removal isn't hitting your Giant Fairy or Heroic Outlaw or Champion of Sherwood, but because of that, in general, I'd hold off playing him until you have one or more challenges you can make, especially since just seeing Shere Khan will often prompt an opponent to just not quest at all. So how do we force challenges? Well, that's why I run Ratigan Very Large Mouse. Most of the characters in the meta right now have 3 or less strength. Tragic Hero, Deceiver of All, Champion of Sherwood, the Plutos, and Ratigan exposes them to your challenges. I do hope Ruby and or Steel get more variations on this in future, but right now I like Ratigan better than Pick a Fight because he also gets a body on the board that can quest or challenge later. The final character in this deck is Maui Hero to All, who needs no introduction. To go with Maui, we run his Fish Hook, which I've already gone into detail on. It's great, just try it. The final cards in this deck are our 2 pieces of non-challenge removal, Grab Your Sword for wide boards, and Along Came Zeus for big things and locations. Let me talk briefly about what isn't in the deck. No Tragic Hero, even though his card draw would be nice, as I honestly don't think he adds much to this deck. deck. No Be Prepared because you really want to preserve your board state as much as you can. No Sumerian Talisman, even though the card draw would be nice because I value Shere Khan's lore gain and the Fishhook's versatility more. No Pick a Fight or an Amari as much as I like them because there really isn't room for them, both because they're uninkable and because I'm running 4 different shift target Floodborn pairs and they take up a lot of room. Lastly, no Cinderellas. Honestly, both Knight in Training and Stout-Hearted would be quite good in this deck, but again, I have to narrow my picks down to just 15 cards, and personally, I'd rather have the lore steal of the Aladdins than the super beefy Stout-Hearted. But if you feel they'd fit better with your playstyle, by all means, swap them in. As I've intimated at, the ideal curve of this deck is turn 1 Beloved Outlaw into turn 2 Capable Fighter into turn 3 Champion of Sherwood. From there, keep inking up to 5 or 6 and play on curve. Make good use of your shift targets to get out your Floodborn, and hold on to your Radigans for when they can let you get in multiple challenges or simply protect your character by leaving them readied. And that's the deck! My next video, as usual, will be showcasing gameplay of this deck, so be on the lookout for that, and in the meantime, give this deck a try and let me know how it works out for you. Challenge your friends to a duel. On guard!